Today on CityCast Boise, creepy clowns, Chinese tunnels, and the Boise curse. Citizen historian Graham McBride is here to walk us through our city's best urban legends, and I find out there's something a bit bizarre about Boise High's basement. It's Monday, March 13th. I'm Emma Arnold, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hi, Graham. Welcome to CityCast Boise.
Hey, Emma. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
We are going to be talking about Boise urban legends, and you are a citizen historian, and you know a ton about Boise history and also just like the fun, weird stuff that goes on in Boise. And I want to start by asking you about my favorite Boise urban legend, which was something from when I was a kid and a teenager, the Park Center clown. The pond clown, he was called. Do you know about this one?
For sure. You know, this is one that I have like a classic urban legend, right? Where I've heard it in the mist, but I don't know anyone who personally experienced this clown or, any of that firsthand knowledge. But as I understand it, and I'm curious what your version of the story that you've heard is, that it was some character who was wearing clown makeup and hanging out around Park Center Park and just like being a general like creepy weirdo and also just like practicing their clown makeup skills. But beyond that, I don't know any more specifics. I'm curious what you heard growing up.
It's about the same. I mean, everybody had a story of like, they heard from someone that they were down there at night and they saw this man in clown makeup, but like the clown makeup had been kind of worn partway off. And he would sometimes talk to people. He would sometimes just stand and like watch people, but that he like lived down there. Some people thought that maybe he like lived there, or is that he would that this was like a nightly activity for him, that he would put on some clown makeup and go for a little night walk. That's what I heard. Yeah. So I think we're about on the same page.
For sure. Yeah. I like to imagine that it was someone who, after their day at Albertsons HQ, clocked off and then just hopped across the street, put on a little clown makeup and practice their practical magic.
He's like, this is my leisure. This is what some people bowl. I like to scare kids in clown makeup. Leave me alone.
Hey, we all have our ways to decompress.
Absolutely. The next one is, this is a famous one. What's weird is I feel like I don't actually know I know this is real, but I don't know the actual history, but the Chinese tunnels.
Yeah.
People say like, some people say like there's miles of Chinese tunnels under the city. What's the deal with the Chinese tunnels?
It's a myth. It's a total myth.
Ah, dang.
I know. Unfortunately, I think one of the easiest ways to kind of debunk it is that underneath our streets, there's no room for tunnels because we have water, we have sewers, we have electrical, we have gas, we have all the stuff going on underneath the streets.
And the original urban legend was that like the Chinese immigrants had built tunnels under the city because at some point it was legal to kill a Chinese person. This is the story I heard, but it was illegal. So to get from one place to another, they built these tunnels so that they could safely travel. But you're saying there's no way, there's not even room for tunnels at all.
And honestly, if you go back to, a lot of this, unfortunately, is just really kind of an anti-Asian sentiment. I think one of the things that's important to remember is that historically, Boise had a very large and thriving Chinatown. Going back to, the 1880s, you start to see these rumors being spread about, these opium dens around town. I was reading yesterday in the Statesman Archives an article from 1882 where the police raided all of these supposed opium dens in town, and they didn't find anyone smoking opium. They also didn't find any tunnels, but it started to kind of plant that seed that, well, they must be doing it somewhere, and they must be doing it somewhere sneaky, and we know they know how to use dynamite, so they must have figured out a way to be secretly mining underneath the roads and are sneaking around doing opium, whatever nefarious activities, anything to really give a bad name to the Chinese community.
Wow, I had no idea. And I mean, I feel like maybe a lot of these urban legends will come back down to, well, racism. That's pretty much what this is about.
Yeah, unfortunately. The one thing I do want to say is that tunnels do exist underneath State Street, in between the Capitol building and the rest of Capitol Mall. So there's an fully underground passage, to be able to cross between those buildings. And then also underneath Boise High School, there are tunnels because there used to be 10th Street used to run through what's now the quad of Boise High School. They had built this tunnel system in order to be able to move between those two buildings without having to cross the street.
Tunnels under Boise High. I did not know that. That's funny because our next urban legend is Boise High based. This was a big rumor when I was a kid, was that no one was allowed in the top floor of Boise High because some kids had died up there and it was haunted. We just had a high schooler on the show, Eve Devitt, and I asked her, she goes to Boise High, I said, are you guys allowed up on the top floor? And she was like, yeah, of course. So apparently debunked already. But what do you know about that?
Yeah, oh, for sure. So, up until the 1960s, Boise High School was the only high school in town. And so it serviced the whole town. And then starting in the 1960s, there was, a move to suburbanization, and the north end of Boise became an unfashionable neighborhood, small lots, small old houses. And people were flocking to South Boise where they could have, a big house, live in a big lot. And they ended up building Borah High School, then later Capitol, et cetera, et cetera. So then the population of Boise High was getting kind of dire. And so in the 90s, the school was really underpopulated with students. They were, stuck with this aging building that needed a lot of work in order to keep it as a functional school. And so they decided to close the third floor of the high school. And it was closed up until 2008. Anytime that you have 10,000 plus square feet of a building that's closed off, you're going to get lots of rumors and conjecture about that. Fortunately, as a theater student, I got to have privileged access to a lot of the normally off-limits parts of the school. And so I got to visit the third floor quite often because we used it as storage. It was just like a big empty space that was badly lit and full of furniture that didn't make any sense, and had been unpainted, and the walls were peeling, and the ceiling wasn't great, and the carpet was horrible, and so it definitely looked like a great set for a horror movie or something. I never encountered any ghosts, anything supernatural up there. The place that really gave me the heebie-jeebies at Boise High School is it was built with an indoor shooting range. So in the sub-basement.
What?
Yes. Yeah, the ROTC used to target practice inside school.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So where we stored costumes was the former shooting range. I mean, full of, 100 years of dead people's clothes, with the walls littered with bullet holes. That is the one space at Boise High School where I really got the heebie-jeebies. And if I think there is a ghost, I think they're down there trying on the fur coats and, checking out the bullet holes.
Practicing their marksmanship.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like if it's not haunted, it should be, for sure. We should move a ghost in. If we're picking on Boise High, I feel like we should talk about Borah, which you said was built after Boise High. I went to Borah, and there was always the rumor, people would always ask, is there really a cockroach infestation at Borah? And the rumor was that either a senior prank had gone wrong, they released a bunch of roaches that multiplied over the years, or that a disgruntled science teacher got fired and released a whole bunch of roaches in the building. Boise High obviously would always tease us about having roaches in the building, and we would be like, there's not roaches in the building. There's definitely roaches at Borah. There's so many roaches. I don't know how they got there, but the urban legend that there's tons of roaches at Borah, confirmed. Yeah, tons of roaches. Very gross.
Yeah.
It's the only place I've actually seen roaches in Idaho.
Unfortunately, going to Boise High School, we always used to make a joke that, there's roaches at Borah, and the only time I see them is on the football field. So.
Oh, nice. Bringing back the old rivalry. Okay, I hope you know about this because this was a big spooky one when I was a kid. The Linden Murder House. What do you know about that?
I know it quite well. I had a friend in high school who grew up on the street, and so I heard various versions of the urban myth, and then later through my own research, find out the true story, which in my opinion is even more macabre and horrible. But the story that I had heard in high school was this: someone living in this house on the corner had murdered his wife and then butchered her and left body parts in the front yard. And then as I got older and started, poking around and doing research to understand the story a little better, I did learn the true story. And there was a murder at the house, 805 Linden Street. It happened in 1987, June of 1987. A 21-year-old named Preston Murr was at the home of his friends Daniel Rogers and Darren Cox. And around midnight of that night, an altercation broke out, and Murr was shot in the shoulder. That Daniel Rogers had used his handgun to shoot him in the shoulder. Murr escaped the house, ran out into the neighborhood, and attempted to escape. Attempted to get into someone's house. He went up and down the block pounding on people's door. And one of the neighbors heard him pounding and heard him screaming, "Let go of me," and was peeking out the window and saw that these two men were dragging this guy back to this house on the corner. And he called the cops. Unfortunately, at the time, the police didn't come and investigate, didn't do anything about it. And then the next morning, they got several other calls from neighbors who found blood on their porches, blood on their door, a trail of blood leading back into the house, which the police went and investigated and found a horrific murder scene. And then later, Murr's body was found along the Snake River.
Really? Holy cow. So totally true. Linden Murder House was the Linden Murder House. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah. And to the graphic detail of, really blood on the sidewalk. It doesn't get any more macabre than that.
Let's talk about one from like when we were kids again. So this was everybody, I think, in fourth grade does a tour of the Capitol. I did it myself. Then I chaperoned it with my kids. And used to be able to go up on the stairs to the rotunda, like used to be able to go up there during the tour. But the rumor was that they stopped doing it because the rotunda was haunted by a kid who fell during a school tour. Is there any truth to that one?
Well, there was a tragic loss of a child at the Capitol. To get to the level of urban legend status, you have to elevate it. The myth is that he fell from the very top, the rotunda of the dome. But it is a true story. In 1926, there was a 9-year-old magazine carrier. His name was Grant Ward. And he was making his rounds, dropping off magazines for the legislatures. And his final stop was on the 4th floor. And being a fun-loving 9-year-old, rather than trudging down the stairs, he decided to slide down the very appealing marble banister, which, unfortunately, I mean, if you visited the Capitol, you're aware that it has the vibe of being this kind of sloping, wonderful, curvaceous turn. But in reality, there's a lot of tight turns. And unfortunately, as he was going down, he lost his balance, lost control, slipped over the side, and ended up tumbling to his death.
Oh, that's so sad. So that one, probably not haunted, but really a kid did fall. And that's very, very sad.
Yes.
Oh. Well, let's talk cemeteries, because Boise cemeteries have some great urban legends. The Warm Springs Cemetery is supposedly haunted by the Confederate ghosts who were out there for some reason. But Old Fort Boise Military Cemetery has a ton of urban legends. It's haunted. People would leave spell jars on the graves. Supposedly satanic rituals happened out there. There's like a story of some boys going out there hiking, getting lost, never seen again. Lost Boy Hill is named for that. And there's stories of lights. I remember when I was a teenager that people would say that they saw lights that were supposedly the Lost Boys. So what can you tell us about all the legends around that cemetery?
Yeah, well, I haven't been able to find much concrete information about the Lost Boys, unfortunately. But as far as that cemetery itself, I mean, I think, one of the realities of it is that it's been moved. Unfortunately, where it was located is that in the spring, when Cottonwood Creek would flood, it would flood through the cemetery, which is just kind of generally bad vibes. Floating caskets is not really what you're going for.
Yeah.
And so they ended up having to move the cemetery higher up onto the hill that it's at now. The majority of the graves that are in it now are just the military graves. As anyone who, visits there can see, they've installed cameras. They lock it at night. I mean, when I was younger, it wasn't like that, and there was definitely, rumors of people doing, witchy things out there. And I have to admit that as a teenager, sometimes we would go out there in the hills and, light some votive candles, and
Sure, you were a theater kid, like
yeah, yeah,
of course you
exactly.
did.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm really just really, getting inspiration for my next role. And then in hindsight, I look back and I think, oh yeah, if somebody came the next morning and saw like half burnt votive candles and other, detritus that we may have left, I could definitely see someone thinking that something sus had happened.
Well, let's talk about the Boise curse. And this is, I know a lot of people have talked about this. The Boise curse is if you try to leave wherever you go, you'll be sabotaged and eventually you will come back to Boise. Have you heard about this, the Boise curse?
Oh yeah, I felt it, Emma.
Oh, yeah. Same.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely something that I have heard about. I remember when I was, a kid. My parents moved here from California in the '90s, and they had friends in town who they had known back home in California, who incidentally had been from Boise and were drawn back here through whatever magnetism this town seems to have. In reality, I think that more than anything, I think it's symptomatic of a tight knit community. I left Boise. I went, out, took a big swing, missed pretty badly, and was assessing my options, and knew that coming back to Boise was somewhere where I had friends and connections, and it's a community that I knew and felt safe in, and somewhere that I was willing to return. It wasn't so horrible when I left that I couldn't imagine myself ever coming back. And I think that is a great sign. I mean, I think that appeal that is bringing so many new people here is felt by all of us who have, been here for decades. And there's just something about this place that you just can't quite shake off.
Yeah, I think that's true. For anybody who's looking to break the Boise curse, I did read that if you're trying to get out of here and you're trying to stay gone, you got to bring a jar of dirt, of Boise dirt with you when you leave. And then maybe you can stay gone. But I haven't seen anybody do it. Most of us end up coming back at some point. So, well, let's do our final urban legend, which I saved for last because it is my very favorite one. What do you know about the Bogus Basin trolls?
Oh my gosh. I don't know anything. This is news to me.
No, really? You haven't heard about it?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite.
What are these trolls?
So, well, maybe, are you a skier? Maybe that's why. It's kind of like a skiing.
I learned to ski and I hated it, but I did ski at Bogus for sure.
Yeah. Well, so maybe this is why you hated it, is because I started skiing there when I was a kid and my parents would take us. And when you drive over the cattle guard, on the way up to Bogus, there's supposedly the Bogus Basin trolls live under that cattle guard, and you have to open your door and there's a lot of variations of it. You had to open your door and lift your feet up when you went over it. Some people hold their breath over it. Some people just open their door, but there's a lot of variations. But the idea is that way, if the trolls want to ride, they can hop in with you and then they go up to Bogus, and then that's good luck. And if you don't open your door or do any of those ritual things, then you have a bad time skiing and you get injured, or you have bad weather, or you just don't have a good time. So maybe you need to try it again and let the trolls tag along, because I'm not a superstitious person, really. I still open my door every time we go up there. I still pop my door open. I can't help it.
That's great. No, and I think that's sage advice. Like I said, I don't have the best background of skiing. If there's ever an opportunity to dust them off and bring some trolls with me up the mountain, and I think there may be something there. And that was the thing, is that I was always taken skiing by an out of towner who didn't know, and this is why locals it's important that we pass on these traditions and these legends.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for filling us in on all the Boise urban legends. I feel like I learned a lot about my town.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Bye now.
And here's some news to know today. Leaked emails between a national conservative Christian group and anti-trans lawmakers in Idaho and other states show a coordinated effort going back years. Mother Jones reports that Idaho House Rep. Julianne Young received support from the Alliance Defending Freedom in 2020 when she sponsored a bill to keep trans people from changing their gender marker on their birth certificate. This session, Young has championed HB 71, which bans gender-affirming care for minors, another policy ADF has supported in states around the country. For more on this story, be sure to subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Leave us a review and subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with Minerva Jane for a special pre-St. Patrick's Day treat. Bye!